She never spoke a word. A young ranch girl with storm-gray eyes kept her face hidden beneath a faded scarf. Folks thought she was shy, but the truth beneath that cloth wasn't shame. It was a scar burned by outlaws, one that could tear the frontier wide open. The desert wind howled like a wounded beast, dragging sand across the plains in long, hissing sheets. Against that endless waste, one figure stood bound to a post, her wrists raw, her face hidden beneath a faded scarf that clung to her skin like a second breath. She had been left there as carrion, another secret to be swallowed by the sand. When the rider came, he cut a dark silhouette against the sinking sun. A tall rancher, shoulders bent with years of dust and work, his horse lathered and restless. He reined in slow, eyes narrowing at the strange bundle of cloth and rope in the desert. A trick? Or a soul abandoned to die? His knife flashed. The ropes fell. She sagged to her knees, clutching the scarf tighter across her mouth and cheeks. Her eyes lifted to him, storm-gray, sharp and pleading, but not a word passed her lips. "Who did this?" he asked, his voice rough as gravel. She shook her head once, fiercely. Behind them, a vulture wheeled lazy circles in the blood-red sky. The rancher felt a chill crawl his spine. Out here, every stranger carried a tale carved in blood. And this, one carried it close behind her veil. He offered his hand. She hesitated, then took it. Together they mounted, the horse straining under urgency. Neither had spoken aloud. He didn't press her for answers. Not yet. The silence between them rode louder than words. Dusk deepened. They passed dry washes and ridges, the earth fractured and broken like a war map. The rancher kept glancing back, sensing shadows that weren't there. But the girl's grip at his coat told him enough. Something hunted her, and it wasn't done. When at last his ranch rose out of the gloom, low against the plain with fences like skeleton ribs, he knew he had made a choice that would change everything. By freeing her, he had stolen her from someone, or something, that would not forgive, and in her silence, he read a warning he couldn't yet name. The night closed in, coyotes yipping on the ridge. He felt her tremble once against his back. But still, she hid her face, salvation, or a crueler fate. Out here, one rode blind until the dust cleared. The ranch at Dust Creek was no palace, just a low timber frame, its boards weathered gray by wind and grit. Chickens scattered as the rider pulled up, hooves thudding against dry earth. He swung down and helped her dismount. She swayed, her legs weak, yet still she kept the scarf clutched tight across her face. Inside, the house smelled of hay and saddle oil. He lit a lantern, its flame painting shadows along the rafters. She stood at the threshold, wary, eyes darting to each corner, as though every wall might hold a snare. "You'll be safe here," he said. His voice was calm, but he knew those words were promises no man could keep in the West. She nodded once, her silence as heavy as a tombstone. He set bread and jerky on the table, poured water into a tin cup. Hunger betrayed her caution. She ate in small, hurried bites, though her eyes never left the door. The rancher studied her across the lamplight. Young, though not a child. Her hands bore calluses, the marks of work. But her eyes, those storm-gray eyes, spoke of nights without sleep and a fear deeper than wolves. Thunder rolled faint in the distance, and with it something sharper, the echo of hooves. He froze, listening. She froze too, cup halfway to her lips. Then, like a deer hearing hounds, she set it down and pressed against the wall. The sound faded, swallowed by the storm. Only rain smell lingered, dry lightning flashing across the sky. Still, unease clawed at him. Whoever had tied her to the desert would not rest easy knowing she was gone. He stoked the fire and set an extra blanket near the hearth. She hesitated, then pulled it around her shoulders, still veiled, still hidden. He leaned against the post, arms folded, trying not to press her. Out here, trust grew slow, like seeds in poor soil. A gesture, a glance, a kindness returned. For the first time, her gaze softened. She reached to take the bread once more, her hand brushing his. The touch was fleeting, but it carried weight. Outside, the storm gathered. Rain began to patter against the roof, washing the dust from the earth. For a moment, there was calm. Two, souls in fragile shelter bound by silence and shadows. But every storm in the west carried riders behind it, and before long, they would come hunting. By dawn, the storm had passed, leaving the air sharp and clean. The rancher stepped outside, boots sinking in wet clay. He scanned the horizon. Nothing but pale light breaking over the ridges, yet tracks told a truer story. Fresh hoof prints, cut deep near the creek bed, circling, then veering north. Someone had searched through the night. When he returned, she was at the window, scarf still drawn, eyes locked on the same horizon. Her hand trembled at the sill, not from weakness, but from knowing the hunt was close. "You've got riders on your trail," he said. She didn't answer. Instead, she turned, moving toward the table where her scarf brushed the edge of the lantern light. For a breath, he thought she might pull it aside, offer the truth her silence had guarded. But her hand stopped short. Instead, she reached for chalk by the door, scratched rough letters onto the wood. "Don't ask. Safer for you." His jaw tightened. Secrets in the West had a way of drawing blood. The day wore on. He worked the corral, patching fences, while she moved with quiet precision, feeding chickens, drawing water, setting the fire. Though she spoke no words, every act was careful, deliberate, as though she had lived on ranches before. He caught himself watching her too long, wondering what price had carved silence into her bones. By evening, thunderheads swelled again. He hauled a sack of feed into the barn, where she waited with a lantern. She handed him a tin cup of water, her eyes meeting his just as lightning split the sky. It was then he slipped the story into the rhythm of the storm. Out here, every choice carries a price. If you've been gripped by this tale so far, ride with us a little longer. Subscribe to hear the next turn, because what comes after tonight may change everything. The lantern flickered. A gust rattled the barn doors. He felt the weight of something unspoken pressing closer. When she turned to leave, the scarf snagged on a nail, tugging loose. For the briefest instant, moonlight revealed a shadow beneath. Skin, marked by something more than dust. A brand burned into flesh. She yanked the scarf back, eyes flashing wild, daring him to pretend he hadn't seen. Outside, hoofbeats thundered faint on the plain. Friend or foe? Salvation? Or a reckoning long? Due, the night would decide. The hoofbeats drew closer before fading into the storm. By morning, the plains carried only silence, but it was the kind that pressed hard, like a held breath. The rancher saddled his horse, scanning the tracks. Riders had come within a mile of the house before breaking away. They weren't wandering, they were searching. Inside, she lingered by the fire, scarf tugged higher than ever. But his eyes kept catching on that memory, the mark he'd glimpsed in moonlight. A brand, jagged and cruel, burned into her skin, not the kind ranchers put on cattle. No, this mark carried menace, a sign whispered around campfires, the symbol of a feared outlaw clan. When he set his hat down, she stiffened. He met her stare. I saw it. Her hands balled into fists. She turned away, shoulders taut, but silence could not erase truth. You're tied to them, he said, his voice low, rough as sand, but not by choice. No one hides like you do unless they're running from the men who burned that mark. She spun, scarf slipping just enough to bear the edge of the scar. Her eyes shone with fury and shame. Then she seized the chalk again. scrawling in jagged strokes on the table. They branded me their own. I refused. I fled. Now they hunt. He read the words slow, the weight sinking like iron. By cutting her free, he had made himself her shield and her target. Outside, dogs barked in the distance. A rider's shout cracked faint across the wind. The storm was no longer weather. It was men on horseback closing fast. He grabbed his rifle from the wall, shoving cartridges into the chamber. She stepped beside him, hand gripping the edge of the doorframe. For the first time, her silence broke, not with words, but a sound low and fierce, a growl of defiance escaping her throat. The barn door rattled. Shadows crossed the ridge. The truth beneath her scarf was no longer secret. It was a brand of war, and the men who claimed her were coming to collect. The night bled red beneath a swollen moon. Riders thundered down the ridge, rifles glinting in the firelight of torches. Their leader's voice carried sharp across the plain. "Bring her out, and we'll leave you breathing. Hide her, and you'll—" "Both die slow." The rancher stood at the door, rifle braced, jaw set. Beside him, the girl pulled the scarf tighter, but her eyes burned fierce. She had fled once. She would not flee again. Gunfire cracked. Wood splintered around them. He shoved her toward the barn, shouting above the storm of bullets. "Stay low!" But she didn't cower. She climbed the ladder to the loft, pulling free a hidden revolver from beneath the hay. She had stolen it long ago, her only weapon against men who thought her theirs. The scarf slipped loose in the scramble, revealing the full brand carved. Across her cheek, ugly, jagged, unmistakable. Yet in the lantern's glow, it was no longer a mark of shame. It was a banner of defiance. Lightning split the sky. The battle began. The rancher fired steady, dropping one rider from his saddle. She answered with her revolver, each shot sharp, echoing against the canyon walls. Torches fell, horses reared. For a heartbeat, the tide turned, but their leader pressed forward. A towering figure draped in black, face hidden beneath a brimmed hat. He dismounted slow, dragging a chain from his belt. "She's ours," he snarled, voice low and venomous. The rancher raised his rifle, but the girl stepped in front of him. Her voice tore through the storm, hoarse from years of silence. "Not anymore!" She fired. The shot rang like thunder. The outlaw staggered, chain clattering into the mud. The riders broke, scattering into the night, leaving their leader crumpled. Beneath the blood moon, silence fell, broken only by the hiss of dying torches. The rancher lowered his rifle. She stood trembling, scarf falling free, the scar bared for the first time without shame. He looked at her, not with pity, but with respect. In that moment, she was not a victim. She was her own salvation. Dawn crept across the plains, painting the world in pale gold. She turned to him, eyes weary yet unbroken. He nodded once, a vow forged without words. Out here in the Wild West, scars told the truest stories, and hers would not be hidden again. If her courage stirred something inside you, don't let this tale end here. Like this story, subscribe, and ride with us for more, because out on the frontier, love and survival are as rare as rain, but they always find a way.